From the Ticats Audio Network, this is a Ticats This Week, built by Turkstra. Whatever your next home project is, build it better with Turkstra. Visit TurkstraLumber.com today.
The gang's back together. Ticats are going to be playing very soon on Saturday afternoon game. 3 o'clock start at Tim Hortons Field against the Ottawa Redblacks. Boy, last time we chatted on Ticats This Week, we were trying to put the pieces together, and Mike Daly, Steve Milton, Luke Tasker, and myself, RJ Broadhead. I think the pieces are all together after that performance against Toronto. 31-28 win. 2 of their 3 wins this season have come against the Argos. They haven't trailed against the Argos this season, and it is such a turnaround from past seasons. Last year, they never led in a game against the Argos and had lost 6 straight, and it just hadn't looked good. But it's been totally different this year. Steve, you're a historian of the Tiger Cats, and over these past couple of seasons, it hasn't been good against the Argos. What do you see different in this year when Hamilton plays Toronto?
Well, I think they're getting to them at the right stage. They're making some big plays at the right times. They came out big against them there. And remember, both games are at home. Let's not forget that. And they hadn't beaten Toronto for how many? Was it 8 or 9 in a row, or 6 or 7 in a row? And that was becoming
they'd lost 6 in a row.
6 in a row, and 2 of them were on Labor Day, which is like a mortal sin in this town. So I think in terms of motivation, that was a big part of it. They'd had a couple of games going into the first win against them, which they looked okay, but they couldn't put together, and they'd blown a couple of games, and they were due. In a way, I felt they were due after a couple of games that they should have won. They should have not been 0-5 when they played them the first time. They should have been 2-3, and in my mind, or could have been. And the same thing, I think. Coming into Labor Day, there was a lot of hype made about this year's Labor Day, and part of it was because they'd lost 2 in a row on Labor Day, which is sinful. This would have been only the first time in actual consecutive calendar years they ever would have lost 3 in a row. So the motivation of that is very, very, very strong, and I think it was played upon by the leaders on the team. And they've been playing a little bit better. They played, I thought, fairly well in Winnipeg, enough that they could have won the game against Winnipeg. So that maybe they were due both times. Now we'll see. I mean, but it puts them. I mean, Ottawa did them a huge favor on the weekend, right? So I mean, Argos are the target now, and each game is the target. They got to win the next few before they get to the Argos in a couple of weeks. But I just think they were due against them. I think in some ways they match up a little better against the Argos than you might think at times, and I thought the fans particularly flustered the quarterbacks in both games. Dukes in the first game, and I thought even though some of his numbers looked really, really good, I thought Kelly was flustered. I thought the fans got to him.
After that game and such a great performance by the Tiger Cats, I kind of thought, it's a bad time for a bye week. Keep things going. You got some momentum, but it was really interesting in postgame. Luke and Mike, you both said that it was a good time for a bye week. Luke, why did you think it was?
Well, it's because I still think like a player for most answers, RJ, and there's no bad time for a bye week as a player. You just you'd like one every week if you can get it to heal up and to rest. I just think the energy of that win doesn't dissipate. It doesn't go away because you have some off days in there. It builds, and you feel confident, and you rest up with confidence, and you're thinking about the win the whole week, and you're dwelling in from that place of success. So I don't have a problem taking a break after that. I think maybe the coaches maybe ask Scott Milanovic, and it'd be nice to just get back to work. Maybe he'd say, I don't know. But then again, you've got a coordinator in Chris Jones who probably can benefit from the time, from the extra time. So I think the bye week is well timed all around.
Mike, you want to jump in on that? I know you and Luke have talked about the long warm-up, too. You guys didn't like that either.
Mike and I, by the time we were vets, I wish that I could just get out of the car, walk in, put my helmet on, and go. I hated the build up to games.
Give me about 10 minutes of jogging around on the field, and then I'm good to go. The whole hour and a half warm up thing, that could be a whole show in itself, Luke. But No, RJ, it's funny you say that because I'm exactly along the same page as Luke, where bye weeks were always good, no matter when they happened. But the difference with this one and just the situation that the Ticats were in was this team needed confidence. And that win was an absolute confidence builder in front of the home crowd, right, at Tim Hortons Field. But I feel that what the bye week does is going to rest everybody up. So even the guys that were playing hurt that you wouldn't notice were hurt because, you're just seeing them running around, those guys are going to get rest. But what it is going to do is you now have a whole week of not having to sit there saying, are we a terrible team? You now have a week of being like, hey, we put this thing together. We're a good team. We have a chance at this. Then you go and watch Ottawa beat Toronto. Now you're coming back to practice feeling energized. You're feeling good. You got this newfound energy. It's almost like a reset of this Ticats team when you get such a confident win and then you get a bye week to go relax, heal up, see some family. And then now seeing things pan out the way you really hope at this point. It's, I see it only as a good thing. But mainly because I still think like a player, and like Luke said, if we could just have a bye week every week and just make it to the playoffs, that'd be great.
Steve, you crunched some numbers. You crunched some numbers.
Yeah,
and you told us before we started recording. It's pretty staggering. The Ticats' record going into bye weeks. Share that with us.
Well, it is, and first of all, let's give credit where credit is due here. This was from something that was just mentioned casually, not casualty, by our boss, Dave Cadeau, who suggested it seems like a long time since they went into a bye week with a win. So naturally, being a reporter, I looked it up, and I'm sure you did too, RJ, because that's the kind of guy you are. But they had not gone into a bye week with a win since 2019. That's 8 bye weeks they went into. This was the 8th that they went into with. So 8 prior to that with a loss. So this was the 9th they went into, with a win, and that's staggering. And the year and 2019, of course, they went into every bye week with a win, and we saw how that season turned out, which was pretty damn good. And you look at it coming out, and I think of those 8. Weeks that they went in, even though they went in with a loss, they came out with wins, except for the last two last season, and those games were close. I think one to Edmonton and one was in Ottawa or in Montreal, and if I'm not mistaken, things were already decided by then too, right? So at least in terms of the final standing. So it's pretty amazing to have gone that long since 2019, 8 times without it.
Well, it feels
I don't
great.
have any explanation. I don't know if the players do.
Ticats Audio Network started in 2021. It's the first time going into a bye week we get to talk about a win coming out of the bye week. So congratulations, guys. Great work on that.
Yeah, all around.
All right. I wonder if I could ask the players, RJ, on that, the former players here, whether the day zero really helps. Because, like, Day Zero being basically a 3D walkthrough in which they install things, which they had on the weekend, then had Monday off, and then went back on Tuesday for Day 1. I think Day Zero, any rust that there might be, any kind of types of things where you're feeling bad about yourself, you could kind of sort out a little bit on that day. That's what it looks like from the outside. I don't know what the players think of that.
Yeah, I mean, the Day Zeros were helpful, and each coach handles the Day Zeros differently. There's certainly some guys. June Jones was a guy who just loved repping plays. Like, we would there was days where we'd put 60 minutes on the clock and we'd run wide receiver drills for an hour. I mean, that's psycho. But that's June was an absolute beauty, man, and he just wanted to do that. We'd run mesh routes, which is like 2 drag routes running across the field at each other, and then the 2 receivers, one from the right ends up on the left and one from the left ends up on the right, so they cross each other over the ball. We would run that like 100 times, and so sometimes you get a Day Zero and you're kind of repping, like, it's not it's just physical muscle memory of your job. And then a lot of coaches, Coach O was certainly like this. Tommy Condell would be. It was a thinking day, walking through. You do some conditioning and stuff, but like the actual field work was more walkthrough of the nuances of play. So either way, I mean, there's value there. And you get to get a little bit deeper into some things than a normal prep week, which is just 3 practices and a walkthrough would be your standard football week. And so, coming out of a bye week, I like it. I mean, and this one, you have the coming off of the Monday Labor Day, kind of you kind of shrunk your bye week anyways, so that's kind of tough. But you get back to it, and sometimes that, like you said, you can work off a little rust with a day 0.
Yeah, and player-wise, too, those day zeros, I mean, you were a little bit upset because it's just another day that you're adding, right? Especially like Luke said, with the short bye week, you try to stack in as many days off as you can. And here's Luke and I, we might as well put on our CFLPA hats talking about all the time off that we want. But
yeah.
The benefit of it, and Luke was bang on, and why June Jones was such a good coach is because with football, it's all about reps. As much as players want to think that they can see it on a video screen and then just go do it, it doesn't really happen that way. You need to get out there, you need to run through the reps at full speed, or else you just won't really be able to experience it the right way. So I always treated day zeros and actually didn't mind them for this reason, but I was a little bit psychotic, as in I liked practice as well. So I treated the day zeros where it was almost shaking the rust off from having a vacation. You know, when you take vacation from your job and then you come back and that first day you're almost a zombie or you're sleepwalking through that first day. Well, that's what it shakes off, so that by the time you hit that day 1, that first day of prep, you're like, oh, okay, here we go. We're right back into it, not sleepwalking through that day 1. So I like day zeros for that reason, and I think it's a good thing for the Ticats to be putting that in place, especially off a big win and a bye week.
Okay, so Mike Daly, who doesn't like to warm up, and Luke Tasker, who wants to walk out of his car onto the field and play a game, they both like an extra day of practice. Who would have thought?
I guess that's true, yeah.
As long as the warm-up's not an hour, yeah, then the extra day's okay.
One thing that Scott Milanovich has preached since he got to the Tiger Cats over a year ago has been the team has to limit turnovers and limit penalties, and it has been an uphill battle to make that happen, but it did happen against the Argos. First time all season, Tiger Cats did not turn the ball over, and they took fewer penalties than the Argos, and they won the game. Do you feel, Mike, that seeing is believing for the players? They obviously know the message, but they were able to do it, and now that they had success with it, do you think this might be a trend that we see going in the proper direction?
Yeah, I do feel seeing is believing for them, RJ. I think that when a coach reiterates something so much, it gets drilled into your head to where you're like, oh, okay, we need to do this, not only just for the wins, but definitely to be able to say, hey, you know what? Let's see if it works out this way. Because I guarantee Coach Milanovich, the first thing he said was, see what happens when we don't take many penalties, we win the game, right? And that's going to be reiterated as they go along. And obviously, some guys have lost their job because of those penalties. So to be able to put that together and have it to come to fruition, because you see it all the time, and Luke and RJ, you both mention it on the game broadcasts, where you're just shooting yourself in the foot. There's so many opportunities for long drives. As soon as you take a penalty, even with some momentum in that drive, you're just playing catch up. So for them to put the game together, and I think it was just 3 penalties that they end up having in that game. That's fantastic. You end up just allowing your offense and your defense to make the plays they need to make and not be hindered by those. So you could guarantee Coach Milanovich on after the game and day 0 and day 1 is going to be saying, see what happens when we don't take penalties. See, so it's going to be driven home to those players for sure.
Yeah, the turnovers were huge, and not only did they not give the ball away in the first drive of the game, they take the ball away. So the defense is stepping up in that and creating a positive turnover ratio. And we've talked, RJ, every game you have such a great cue on these stats, and as you've noted, the first quarters have been brutal all season. Just no energy, no offensive production. They're not finding any rhythm until it's almost halftime, and this was entirely different. The defense stepped up with a turnover, And that snowballed into 3 consecutive touchdown drives to start the offensive game off for the Ticats. And so it was, not only can Milanovic say, you fixed the actual problem, but then look what happens as a result of doing things the right way. You get a turnover and then you protect the ball, and all of a sudden you've got a lead on a team who nobody thought you could beat, and then you maintain it. So it was entirely different. I mean, it's a huge step in the right direction, and it was complementary football, the turnover ratio and the big plays.
Well, and the big thing too about that, Luke, starting fast, like you mentioned, it seemed like the Ticats and the Argos did a little role reversal on the season, in the sense that it always feels like the Ticats were the ones that started slow, and it was crawling back, putting some good quarters together, getting close, but then not being able to do it. And it just goes to show you how starting fast makes it that much more difficult, because Chad Kelly, after that first quarter, played really well throughout that game, but just too much of a hole to dig out of.
You're so right. And if you think through, that's a great point, Mike. We've seen this exact game all season flipped, where the opponent gets off to a great start. The Ticats can't make anything happen, can't stop them, then start to gain momentum. And that's exactly what Toronto did. Toronto went down, kicked field goal. They couldn't get in the end zone. Then as they started to climb back into it, it just wasn't enough, and the Ticats were able to hold on at the end of the game. Like, we've literally seen the inverse of that 5 times this season for a 3-9 football team. I mean, that first quarter just goes a long way towards making the season into what it's been.
If I can just add to that about the inverse, Luke, they also came up with a couple of stops late in the game that hadn't happened. That kind of thing. That was an inverse too, where they had been unable to come up with stops. The downfield coverage on a couple of plays late in the game was outstanding.
Yep.
And
right.
I wonder about this as a teaching point too. When we talked about, hey, see what happens when you don't turn the ball over, when you don't do this, when you don't do the other thing. They had, you're right, only 3 penalties, but 2 of them came late in the game. The kind of penalties that can cost you games but they didn't, because they came up with a couple of big plays right after that. They made the odd first down, but they also made some stops, and so you had this near miss. You can actually go to this as a teaching point, and I'm asking you as players. You say, hey, you see what happened here? We almost took ourselves out of it again, but we didn't. And there's nothing better, I think, of a lesson than a near miss that could have cost you but didn't, because you came up with some big plays after it. But don't make those plays again. Don't make those penalties again. They almost did it again. Those penalties would have cost them in other games this year.
I think you're right, and I think you can. It's always, we said this in 2019, Mike. It was all the time. It's like we'd play so bad and we'd somehow win the game, and it's like such an easy lesson to learn when when you can sort of take it in stride and you keep winning games and you get better and better that way. And there was a few in this Toronto game that you could say, Steve. I mean, they had a much healthier lead, then all of a sudden it got incredibly tight. At the end of the game, and you got to come out and start that third quarter the same way you started the game, and they weren't able to do that. And so I mean, and it goes back to the bye week too. You come out of a win like that, Labor Day, have rest, you win the game, an unlikely win. And it makes it even easier to correct all those little things.
Just to back up those quarter 1 stats and how one game changes a whole season statistically, in the first 11 games, Tiger Cats had 24 points and 2 touchdowns in the first quarter. Against Toronto, they had 21 points and 3 touchdowns. So now you look at those stats in the first quarter as a season, and they don't look so bad. So one big game, and maybe 6 more to end the season will really change those statistics that happened in the first 11. And to touch on how the Tiger Cats got a big play late when they needed it, that Bo Levi Mitchell pass to Brandon O'Leary Orange. It was a 2nd and 8. Ticats were just on Toronto's side of midfield. If they don't convert a first down, they got it right down to the goal line and were able to kneel the game out. A 48-yarder to O'Leary Orange, just a huge play. But Taulia Tagovailoa was in, and then Bo came in and made that pass, and we saw kind of a 2-quarterback thing. Let's first talk about Bo, and couple of big plays. Longest of the season, a 70-yarder to Tim White. He also had a 57-yarder for touchdowns, that 48-yarder to Brandon O'Leary-Orange. In a weird way, Mike, do you think that getting pulled for Taylor Powell has remotivated Bo to prove that he's still got it?
Yeah, you worry about a guy that ends up having to do that gets pulled and then has to come back in and play, because I've seen it hundreds of times and it goes one way or the other. Either the person steps up, and very rarely actually does the person step up, use it as a chip on the shoulder, hey, I'm just going to go out there and prove everyone wrong. It usually ends up in the way that, oh, this team doesn't trust me anymore. One bad thing happens, it's going to stack on and stack on and stack on, and that's the thing you get nervous about. But Bo, he went out there and let it fly and was seeing the field well. I credit the game plan as well. Like, Tim White was wide open on a few of those ones too, but you still got to complete those passes, and Bo looked good. So that just goes to prove, like, that's why they brought him in here. They know what Bo Levi Mitchell is. He's won big games in his life before. He's been around forever, what it seems like, and that's the competitor he is. So I'm happy for him, because that's a hard thing to do. It's a hard thing to get pulled, say you're not good enough, say they're going with a younger guy, come back in, have a game like that. And yeah, RJ, you mentioned that pass at the end of the game to Brandon O'Leary-Orange, like, just a big time throw when you need it. Like, that's what I have come to know Bo Levi Mitchell as. And yeah, what a play that was. And we talked about it in the post game, but just an unbelievable throw and good timing for it.
And the guts to throw that ball. I mean, the guts to call it, but the guts to throw that in that situation and trust your receiver. And that's another thing, I think, Luke, that when we talk about your analysis, great word, inverse, of certain types of games before. Other teams have been out jumping Hamilton for the ball, both on offense and defense, much of the year. Mm-hmm. And that one, he put it up, and I think there was a couple in this game that were put up there, trust the receiver, and the receiver came through with big catches. Tim had one. There was a couple of others as well. And not that there haven't been great catches this year. It's been a good offense for the most part in terms of yardage. But, yeah, to come up with the clutch play, the cut where you outplay the other guy. It was a great throw. It was right in the bucket, but it also took a catch as well. It took concentration. That he had to have laser focus on that ball, totally laser focus, because he knew. He knew what was going to happen to him the second he touched the ball.
Taulia Tagovailoa turned out to be quite a story in that game against the Argos. In there because Taylor Powell was injured, his second game suiting up. I don't know if you guys expected to see number one Tagovailoa on the field and playing as much as he did. He completed a pass for 6 yards. It was a short one. Rushed for his first CFL touchdown. Luke, I was surprised to see him on the field. What did you think, and the amount he played and how effective he was?
Yeah, well, I was certainly surprised to see him. I didn't have anywhere on my notes anything about that offense being showcased in the game. Was very surprised to see him come on the field. Not only to start, of course, like you mentioned, he scored a touchdown early on in the game, but I was especially surprised when he came on the field late in the game. When, I mean, Toronto was making a real effort. They were in the game, and and Ticats had to have offensive success. And Tagovailoa shared the burden there with Bo Levi Mitchell, who then, of course, at the end came and made that throw to Brandon O'Leary-Orange, as we just discussed, and that was sort of the final dagger. There was that big reception down to the 4-yard line or so. But Tagovailoa was in there as well, and so to kind of play with a package like that. I mean, I remember times where Zach Collaros and Jeremiah Mazzoli, obviously Dane and Mazzoli for a handful of seasons went back and forth together. Dan Lefevre and Mazzoli and Zach Collaros, we were always sort of playing with things like that. But for Tagovailoa to be so new in the CFL, to have come up here just recently, and then to be volleying that with at a time that's very meaningful in the game, I don't know. I was really shocked by that, but they were successful with it, and it shows a lot of confidence and a lot of guts from Scott Milanovic. And And maybe and also what I kind of admire is just some willingness to give something a shot, to not be afraid to do something that's a little bit outside of the ordinary, and see how successful you can be. So good for Taulia Tagovailoa, because that was he came in at a moment where the Ticats needed to maintain possession late in that fourth quarter and continue holding their lead and getting back and scoring more points. So all around, I mean, you've got Taylor Powell, who's, we think, back on the field. We don't know about the lineup this week or the depth from top to bottom for the Ticats quarterbacks, but you've got a lot of guys who have already done some impressive things on the field this year.
Mm-hmm. Steve, you're around the team a lot.
Yeah.
You're at practice. Again, like Luke said, we won't have the depth chart until Friday. But do you see Tagovailoa as a guy who can really be used in this offense for the Tiger Cats going forward, that he really proved himself on Labor Day?
Absolutely. And I think he's also just the threat of using him. I can't possibly see him not dressing. And I just want to go back to what the guy said earlier, RJ, that I think Mike asked me about it in the pregame show, whether I expected to see him, even though we knew he was going to be in uniform because Taylor had been hurt, but I did not. I did not expect to see him, and I said that to Mike. I think it's too early. But so they've actually must have done a lot of this sort of undercover beforehand. But this is the CFL of 2024, I think, and teams are doing it, saying, okay, we are putting our running quarterback in now, and he's the kind of guy that can sprint outside. And sometimes you'll do it to throw the other team off rhythm. Sometimes you'll do it just because your quarterback isn't particularly set for that. We're seeing a couple teams do that, bringing in a guy, and not just for short yardage situations, but for running situations, just to stretch them a little bit. And the other part about that's great is that now that you've done it, it's in the minds of whoever you're playing next.
Well, and Steve, to be honest, I believe that there's going to only be a bigger package for Taulia, because the biggest thing that they were able to do, especially late in the game, and the reason they only went to it late in the game, is when you have a running quarterback, all of defense is structured so that the free safety is your extra player. And because you don't expect the quarterback to run, you don't expect the quarterback to be in a run game, anything like that. So you're actually cheating on defense by saying, hey, this quarterback's not going to run. They'll throw the ball, but we'll get after him with 4 people on 5 most of the time. As soon as you introduce that quarterback, you now either have to ask all of your defensive backs to play cover 0 and bring in that free safety to try to stop the run, or you're just playing outnumbered in the box, which that's what the Argos were trying to do. They were saying, hey, we know you're going to run the ball, so what we're going to end up doing is bring in a quarterback. We're going to outnumber you at the point of attack, and then we'll just drive down the field. And you saw it time and time again, and that's why Taulia, I think, is going to have a bigger role, because the Ticats were struggling trying to run the ball. And we talked about this before that last game at Tim Hortons Field for Labor Day. There just wasn't these big plays that were happening at running the ball. So, hey, let's put in a new formation where we get the quarterback to run the ball. Now we can give it to Greg Bell. Now we can give it to Taulia. There's so many more options now. So I'm expecting it to be bigger, and there to be an option where Taulia is going to throw it a few times too, just to keep the defense off balance.
I couldn't agree more.
The running game. I'm a big James Butler fan. I have been since he got to Hamilton. He's been on the 1-game injured list. We'll see coming up for Friday. But in the meantime, Greg Bell has come in and has been very, very productive in 2 of his 3 recent starts in a row. 4 touchdowns over those 3 games. Steve, do you think he's the running back going forward?
I think so. I mean, he's definitely starting this weekend, and I don't think when we talked to Milanovic earlier in the week, he said that it's very difficult at this point in time, given a couple of situations in the roster, to get both of those guys in the game or in uniform at the same time. He said there's not an indictment in any way on who James Butler is, but that Bell right now gives them the kind of thing that they need. And one of the things that they do need is once you get through that, if you can establish him through the line, if they can get the block for that first hole, he hits it quickly, he hits it on an angle, he makes it difficult to tackle because he can zig and he can zag pretty quick, and we cannot discount this as as long as he can get out there and the ball they can get to him, like let's use Malden as an example, Lorenzo Malden, who they're going to play this game, very good at dropping off and jumping up and trying to make you throw over to him. If they can get the ball past whoever that is out there into that little swing pass, you get him into the open field, and he's got not just one change of speed, he's got at least 2 changes of speed, and you're in open field, and that's what you want. And Scott kept saying, look, this James is a different type of runner. Bell, for this moment against this next game, and based on what happened last game, that's what they need in this game, is that kind of quick, I think, quick hit up the middle. And then also his question is, does he break the first tackle? And if he does, or they don't get near him, if the blocking continues to be as improved as it is, and the 4 sacks notwithstanding, they've been opening some holes, and if they can do that, and they can do it on a consistent basis, that's the right guy at the right time for this offense right now.
The threat of the run can only help the passing game, and Tim White is back 2 straight games, way over 100 yards receiving. Mm-hmm. Remember way back early in the season, we were wondering what's wrong with Tim White. Well, he looks like Tim White. Now leads the team in touchdowns, leads the team in receiving. He's just kept at it. Luke, that's your position, receiver. What have you seen Tim White over the past couple of games compared to earlier in the season?
Well, we always used to talk about what comes first, success or confidence, and it's sort of a chicken and egg thing, obviously, like sort of a rhetorical question, like you need both, and one's got to help the other, and you just saw neither of those early this season. It looked like there was no confidence really between the quarterbacks. At that time, it was Bo playing, and Bo and Tim. It's for some reason it didn't seem like a confident connection there, and there was little success too. You had drops sort of across the receiver room to start off in the first month of football this season, and whichever came first, Tim's kind of has been able to find it now, and so you see the success, you see the big plays, and it certainly appears more confident. And Mike, I mean, every player has some history or memory of that same sort of balance. Like, why am I not playing good? Why is it not feeling right? And you kind of self conscious, and you're worried about messing up. And so you even play worse and worse and worse. And you start doubting yourself. So you play worse. And in flipping that around, you get the success comes, or you make one big play. And it's like all at once the confidence comes back, and that starts building in that same direction too, with success and confidence. And then, the best mindset, I think the way that you play the best as an athlete is when you're first of all having fun and loving it. And also like almost wanting to show off, like you really want to be the guy who scores the touchdown or makes the big tackle, or who gets his name called, and you're not worried about messing up. You really want to do it and love doing it. And so that's the Tim White that we've been watching for the past couple of weeks now. And it's the Tim White that the Ticats need. And he makes a difference.
So Tim's been good. Shamar Bridges' production has dropped off. 2 catches in each of his last 2 games. None of them over 10 yards. No second down receptions in his last 2 games. Very surprising statistics. Mike, you spent a lot of time on defense. Is this just simply defenses keying on Shamar Bridges more?
Yeah, it's a little bit of that, and I also believe it's a little bit of Tim White having more success and some other players having some more success. There's only one ball to go around, and if Tim White's putting up 200 yards a game, well, then there's only so many more catches to go the other way. I do believe there is a emphasis on taking Shamar Bridges out of the game plan a little bit for defenses, because you get statistics every single week. You get what looks like a novel full of pages that are going to tell you what this other team does. And one that's going to be highlighted is Shamar Bridges on second down. And so I think in these last 2 weeks, that's been a focal point, especially in second down. Okay, let's not give him the easy one, because Bo likes to check it down to Shamar on whatever it is, the digs, the slants that we see him catch and turn it into first down. So there's a little bit of that, but it's just one of those situations when it's such a long season. Some guys are going to get more looks than others in certain games. And obviously that Argos game, it was Tim White's going to be open every single time we look at him, so that's where we're going with the ball. And it just wasn't a Shamar Bridges game, but who knows? It could be Shamar Bridges' game against Ottawa. It really depends on how Bo's seeing it. But what I thought was the Argos were trying to take away a lot of those early reads on Bo, which a guy like Tim White fits in perfectly like that because he can run by a few guys. So yeah, I'm not worried about Shamar Bridges, if that's the question. I'm not worried about what he might do out of the rest of the season. But, just one of those slumps that I think every single player in the CFL season goes through a little bit, and he'll be fine coming out this backside.
Same thing happened with Tim White. And Scott said this. They were redesigning a few things, and they said in redesigning that and spreading the ball around a little more, taking what's available, which is what he wanted his quarterbacks to do, take what's available. And by doing that, Tim White was probably going to get a little less action. And Scott said that. He said this could cost him certain things, but it might open him up more eventually. And I think two things have happened here. They're not really with Bo in there. They're not a run pass option team as much as they are a play action team. So establishing, at least trying to do the run, helped a little bit to freeze the defense a little bit that way. And also, I think he looked off the safeties quite a bit on second down and looked to that short option. And by looking that off, it created that little bit of delay. And two of the big plays to Tim were on delayed crosses, right? Putting him in the right situation that came, I think, from looking off the safety a little bit, just freezing him enough on Shamar, maybe shading towards Shamar a little bit. Even if he didn't move there, he looked him off. And the fact that they had they froze them a little bit with the potential for the run, and both of those played right into Tim's hands. And I think they had the matchups exactly that they wanted, and they actually probably could have had more.
Big play in that game was Mark Leggio's 55-yard field goal. I think all Ticats fans, that's a big field goal, 55 yards, half the field, and it was a no-doubter. Luke, you were a holder for a lot of kickers. You must have some good clutch field goal stories.
Yeah, I remember Sergio Castillo, who's obviously still doing well in his career. I remember him missing a field goal in BC in the first half, and then making a long field goal. I think it was 52 yards just before the half to I think that was to tie the game as we went into halftime. We continued on to win that game. And that was a really interesting game in BC, and it was a fun win, and kind of needed it and made it happen. And I remember Justin Medlock with a bunch of good kicks. Brett Maher. I mean, I held for a lot of great kickers. It was very fun. I remember a high snap over my head that I caught, but had to leave my knees and then put it on the ground. And Justin Medlock, and it was like a 50-yard field goal, and Medlock made the kick.
That's
which
all
is hard
holder.
because
That's all holder right
now. Well, I mean, I didn't want to say that, but well, you'd be sorry because that really, kickers are kind of like racehorses, like they get spooked, So yeah, that was kind of like. Daly shaking his head. Justin was the spookiest the bull of all the racehorses. And if they see, it's a microchip of an operations snapper holder kicker. There's not supposed to be any variation in the operation. And so if the snap goes high and the holder, has to jump up to get it, even if it can be kicked, sometimes the kicker's like, oh boy, this is, fire, but you can't break, dead play. But I remember Justin kicking that one and being good. So yeah, it's a touchy thing. And for 55 yards, like we saw from Leggio at a Labor Day Classic, that'd actually be an interesting stat. The longest Labor Day Classic kick. We should have that for next week's podcast. But that has to be one of the legendary ones because that's high stakes in a big game, and it was a really well struck ball.
One of the greatest kicks in all of Ticat history. I mean, there's obviously the one that won the '72 Grey Cup. that by a 19-year-old from town. That's 50 years ago now. But the one that sticks in my mind, of course, is Paul Osbaldiston beating Montreal when they thought they had the game won and sending them into the Grey Cup against Montreal, and Montreal collapsing on the field. It was 52 or 3 yards, and I always said he was probably closer to kicking the other way than he was kicking, and it was into this crosswind. It was an unmakeable kick, and he made it. And on that note, the day after Labor Day this year, I ran into Paul Osbaldiston on the street, and we got talking about it, and the first thing he brought up was Legio's kick. He said that was an unbelievable clutch kick, from the guy who, in my mind, made the greatest clutch kick in Ticat history. And he said that's the first thing he mentioned was Legio's 55-yarder. He said on Labor Day, in that kind of pressure, and what that might have meant, given the way the game might have gone had he missed, given the field position, all of those kinds of things. He said that was an unbelievable clutch. First thing he brought up.
Isn't it? Hamilton's a great town. You just run into people like Oz walking down the street after
right.
Labor Day,
right.
and he can just start telling you stories about about kicks. That's pretty good.
Yeah, no, my only field goal story, not being on the field goal team, a holder or anything, was just if they sent the kicker out, I expected them to make it. So no matter where it was, if they didn't make it, I'd be sitting on the sideline going, man, what is going on here? Like, that's your only job. You should be able to make every one of those. My favorite field goal story is Luke running a fake in Calgary. Luke Lowe was at the Grey Cup in Calgary against Winnipeg. We had a little field goal fake dialed up, and Luke ran a little pitch back the other way that worked out pretty well. We were fired up. It didn't end up working out for us at the end of the game, but that just goes to show you how much I care about the kicks. Just make them, please.
Yeah, Mike sees a trick play, now he's interested. But,
right,
for the regular.
Yeah, that's right.
No, that was desperation mode in the 107th Grey Cup, and the look wasn't there, but I called the fake anyways because we had it was do whatever you can, and it worked still. So we got the first down. I can't remember. I can't remember if we scored a touchdown or kicked a field goal, but we got points on the drive. But then the rest is history, as we all know. So
so you called the fake.
Yeah, well, it's called it's like the fake is on, but Luke has to see the look. If he doesn't see the people in the right spot, we're killing the fake and we're going to kick the field goal. So the guys weren't where they're supposed to be, and we also had an injury in the field goal group, which is very hard for a fake. You don't get it once you're to the second tier of bodies in a trick play scenario. You don't rep it enough, and it's not normal enough where people can just know where they're supposed to be. So there was some mix-ups out there, and so everything was kind of wrong. But we said, "We'll just do it anyways."
Yeah, well, Luke said, "Screw it, we'll do it anyways." It was everyone else.
I said that to myself.
They're probably down there in their stands, go, "What are we doing?" Okay, I guess.
Yeah, something. I go up. I was the holder, then I went up to be the wing, the wing position of the field goal team, and then I ran behind and got the pitch from. No, I'm blanking.
It was Liram.
Who would have been there?
Liram.
Yeah, I guess Liram. It was probably Liram stepped
Liram
up to get the direct snap and tossed it to me. So yeah, it's good. I think that was my only catch in the Grey Cup. Actually, was the pitch from Liram Hiralahu. I wish I would have got one from Dane Evans, but I don't think it even happened in that game. So
that close to Grey Cup MOP. That close.
That close. Yeah.
Well, so. We're 2/3 through the season. It flies by. We're coming off of bye weeks. We've got a third to go, and the Tiger Cats over the last few years have been really good finishing the season. Last year they were 3-3, but that last game against Montreal, it didn't mean anything. They were playing in the playoffs, so that was kind of a lot of backups for both teams. So still finished at 500. In 2022 they finished 5-1, and in 2021, the shortened season, they finished 4-1. So you look at the role they're on with finishing seasons well and the way they played on Labor Day. Steve, how are you feeling now about the Tiger Cats' playoff chances?
Well, I mean, it's reduced to chasing one team in my mind, and that's Toronto. But, I think that's got to be in Toronto's head. Look, they have to win out or go 5-1 and make sure that the one they lose is not to the wrong team. And then maybe, if they can go 5-1, at least they've done their part. And, they're playing better, but it's still only a couple of games that they've played better. And how I feel about their playoff chances are way better than I thought before the Toronto game. Way better. I mean, obviously, had they lost that game, what are we looking at that point? And so now that they've got it squarely that they can catch Toronto. Yes, they're still 6 points back, but Toronto squandered their game in hand last week, and they've now lost 2 in a row. They know that they've got to pick up a couple of wins in here somewhere before they face Ticats again. That game in Toronto when they play against the Ticats, if the Ticats are still alive, which I think they might still be by the time they get there, that could be like a Toronto or a Ticat home. Yeah, 2 weeks. That's right. So it'd be a Ticat home game. So if it goes right this weekend on both ends, and then you could be coming in there with the Argos really wondering about themselves in certain areas. So I feel better about it. I don't think the Western crossover, I think there's maybe 2 or 3 possibilities where you could have a west to east crossed over, but that's pretty well, an east to west crossed over, but I think that's pretty well diminished now too. So you've got your target, and I think that's a good thing. You can only play the game that's in front of you. And I talked to Scott Milanovich about that a couple of days ago, and he said, I'm not changing from that. You can't win 5 until you win 1 or 2. It would be 2 in a row then now. So, yeah. And they're playing better. They feel better about the way they're playing, even about the loss in Winnipeg.
That game Toronto squandered, that game in hand you mentioned, Steve, was against Ottawa. Ottawa beat them pretty good, 41-27. Yep. Probably the best scenario for the Tiger Cats catching Toronto, because Ottawa, they've got 8 wins. They'd be tough to catch, but we know the Tiger Cats need to beat them on Saturday. It's interesting because the Argos are in BC on Friday, a 10 o'clock start, so that won't be easy, and we'll know by the 3 o'clock start at Tim Hortons Field against the Redblacks, that result, obviously. And if it's another loss for the Argos, Tiger Cats have put themselves in a spot that a win against the Redblacks, now Tiger Cats would have 4 wins, Argos would have 6 wins. They play the following week, and that would really set things up. Redblacks, though, this is a great football team compared to what they have been in the past 2 seasons. Mike, why are the Redblacks so much better this season?
Well, number one is, I believe, the Sean Burke effect. I mean, we all know Sean Burke is the GM here with the Ticats when Luke and I played, and I just think he does things the right way. He's a really good GM, and he brought in the right people. Tommy Condell didn't work out here, but that's how it goes. He ended up going there, and he's put together some good things. And I just think they have a good offense. They ended up striking gold a little bit with Drew Brown here. He's able to put together Tommy Condell's offense and put some big plays up. But when you look at that last game against the Argos, Ottawa's defense stepped up big time. They were all over the place. They were, I think it was like 6 sacks. They had 2 pick sixes. There's a lot that Ottawa does well, but they're in that world. I know they have 8 wins, but you'll see some games from Ottawa where you're like, hey, what the heck is going on with this team? But they've been managing to pull it out because they are a complete football team when they're together. They have, one of the better returners in Devontae Dedmond, and offensively, Drew Brown has shown that he can do a lot of good things, and Tommy has a lot of the ex-Ticats there that know that offense really well, so they're able to put something together. And defensively, you saw what they did last week. So it's not going to be an easy test for the Ticats going against Ottawa. You hope you catch the Ottawa team that, is kind of the Jekyll and Hyde side of it, where it might be a little bit of a disaster. So, but that being said, when the Ottawa looks at this game film against Toronto that the Ticats put together, it's not going to be an easy task for them either. It's another good returner that the Ticats are going to face in Dedmond, but they did such a good job against Jarian Grant. There's confidence everywhere on this team. But yeah, Ottawa, I do believe it starts with the GM, Sean Burke, because, Luke, you know this just as well as anybody. He brings in good football players, but good people as well, people that want to win really bad and super competitive people. So I believe that echoing now finally throughout that Ottawa Redblacks team, and it takes some time.
Yeah. Sean was an important part of the 2000 teens, for the Ticats, the teams that Mike and I were a part of, and brought some great guys in, and he's a really good guy himself. And Tommy Condell has found another successful home there, and good for him. And Tommy was a huge part of my own career, and when he finds a guy that he trusts, he can build things around individual players. Jalen Acklin and Braylon Addison, and Braylon's had a tough go with injuries, but still has been a difference maker when he's been in there. And I think back to RJ to this year's Red Black team, the walk-off field goal that we called earlier this season, which was very close to that early part of the season, with a Saskatchewan game that came down to the wire, and ended with a brutal turnover when the Ticats were just plagued with brutal turnovers. And those two games, I mean, you think about as an 18-game season progresses, if you could have two of those back, which could have happened, all you needed is a few seconds or a few inches here or there for either of those games, right? And if you could have two of those back, now you're sitting here at, if I'm going to do math live on camera, I think it would be 5-7, if I'm thinking about that correctly. And and you're even that much closer. So this is a Red Black team that you almost beat in Ottawa, you got to think that way as a player. You got to rationalize why it's possible that you beat this team, that you go beat a team that's 8-3. And one of the clearest reasons to me is, firstly, because you're playing much better now. You're doing things much better, and secondly, even before you did that, you almost beat them already this season. So I think the Ticats are positioned to continue and string a second win on the back of that Labor Day game.
One of the if I can. You guys talked about Berkey and what a job he's done building and looking at the depth. These are some of the guys that were out of the game when they beat Toronto. Addison's on the sixth game. Acklin, took that terrible hit to the head. He'll be back for this game, so he'll be playing. They were without Johan Santos Knox, their leading tackler. They were without Pimpleton, who's really was coming on as a backup receiver and a runner, and Dedmon didn't play that game. They had a bunch of guys not out, and then they lost an offensive lineman during that. And I think, to now move into the next part of that is one of the keys. I think they haven't, they had to let their running back go for personal reasons, for violating whatever team policies it was that they violated. And so they really haven't established a running back there. I mean, the quarterbacks can run, which is a bit of a devastating, but they haven't established a running back yet in a new running back yet, and they've got a couple of holes on that offensive line, and I think that's why that front four is for Hamilton is such a key to this game. And how do you nullify what I think is an extraordinarily good linebacking core on that team that really matches up well against what Hamilton does?
Yeah, it's going to be a great game. One thing we know in the CFL this season is anyone can beat anyone else on any given day, and this is going to be a big weekend coming up. The Argos play in BC on Friday, and then the Tiger Cats on Saturday afternoon. It's a 3 o'clock kickoff at Tim Hortons Field. They host the Ottawa Redblacks, a very important game for the Tiger Cats' push to the playoffs. We definitely appreciate you listening to Ticats this week. Steve Milton, Luke Tasker, Mike Daly, great job. I'm RJ Broadhead, and don't forget, 3 o'clock kickoff, Tim Hortons Field. Get there, support the Ticats as they try to get into the postseason. The pregame show is at 2 o'clock on the Ticats Audio Network, and Luke and me have the call right at 3 o'clock on ticats.ca/listen. Thanks for listening today.
This has been the Ticats This Week, built by Turkstra. Whatever your next home project is, build it better with Turkstra. Visit TurkstraLumber.com today. Like and follow the Ticats Audio Network on Spotify, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcast content, and get a deeper understanding of your Hamilton Tiger Cats.